She didn't say goodbye. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just pulled back. And you noticed it maybe not right away, but you felt it. The replies got slower. The warmth faded slightly. The energy shifted. And then came those two words. I need space. Most people hear that and immediately panic. They start asking questions. They start over-explaining. They start reaching harder. But here's what almost nobody tells you: the moment she says she needs space is rarely the beginning of the problem. It's the end of a long, quiet process that already happened while you weren't looking. Let's be clear about something first. The phrase "I need space" has been misused, misunderstood, and overanalyzed in modern relationships. People treat it like a sudden event, like a switch that flipped overnight, but human emotions don't work that way. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to emotionally detach from someone they genuinely feel connected to. Emotional distance is a process. It's slow. It's quiet. And in most cases, it's been building for weeks, sometimes months, before it ever gets a name. When a woman says she needs space, she is not describing a decision she just made. She is describing a feeling she has been carrying silently and has finally found the courage, or perhaps the emotional exhaustion, to say out loud. Understanding that difference changes everything. Because if you're treating it like a sudden crisis, you will respond to it the wrong way. And responding the wrong way, especially in that moment, almost always accelerates the distance rather than closing it. So what's really happening here? What does the psychology actually say? Let's break it down slowly. Think about the early phase of any relationship, or even the early phase of a strong attraction. There's a natural energy present, an emotional aliveness. Every conversation feels like it carries weight. Every interaction feels slightly charged. She's engaged, responsive, curious. She invests emotionally without even thinking about it. That's not love yet. That's the nervous system responding to emotional novelty. The brain in that phase is producing dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in ways that make everything feel heightened. Psychologists call this the limerence phase, where the emotional investment is almost automatic. You don't choose to be obsessively engaged. You just are. Now here's where most people make a critical mistake. They assume this phase is the foundation of the relationship. It isn't. It's the preview. And what happens after the preview is where the real story begins, and where the seeds of emotional distance are quietly planted. Once that initial chemical high begins to settle, and it always does, the relationship enters what psychologists call the attachment phase. This is where two people begin to truly see each other. The idealized version fades. The real person appears. And this phase is where one of the most underappreciated psychological dynamics begins to surface. Predictability. When everything becomes expected, when the texts are always there, when the effort feels guaranteed, when the emotional investment feels certain, something subtle shifts in the nervous system. The brain stops registering the relationship as stimulating, not because the love is gone, not because the person isn't valued, but because the brain is wired on a biological level to become less reactive to things it already considers secure. This is where the emotional cooling begins. This is where she starts to need something the relationship is no longer providing, without either of you fully realizing what that thing is. Here's the shift that almost no one notices in real time. Before she ever says, "I need space," there is a period where she is already testing the emotional temperature of the relationship. She pulls back just slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. She takes a little longer to reply. She becomes a little less forthcoming with her thoughts. She stops volunteering information the way she used to. And then here's the part that changes everything: she watches. She's not doing this consciously in most cases. It's an emotional instinct, a self-protective mechanism. She's checking. Does this person notice? Does the dynamic shift? Does anything change when I pull back, or does everything stay exactly the same, regardless of my level of engagement? If the answer is that nothing changes, if the attention remains equally constant, if the effort stays the same, if the emotional investment flows regardless of her level of reciprocation, something registers in her subconscious. The relationship feels emotionally flat. Not bad, not toxic, just flat. And flat is psychologically one of the most dangerous places a relationship can be, because people don't leave relationships that make them angry. They leave relationships that make them feel nothing. Let's go deeper into the psychology here, because this is where most relationship advice completely misses the point. There's a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement, and while it's often discussed in the context of unhealthy dynamics, There is a natural, healthy version of it embedded in every emotionally alive relationship. When two people are genuinely connected, the emotional experience is not constant. It fluctuates. There are moments of closeness and moments of independence, moments of tension and resolution, moments of pursuit and retreat. That natural fluctuation is what keeps emotional engagement high. When a relationship becomes too predictable, when one person is always available, always responsive, always emotionally present, regardless of context, the nervous system of the other person adapts. In psychology, this is known as adaptation level theory. We calibrate our emotional responses to whatever becomes the new normal. And when constant attention becomes the baseline, it stops producing the emotional response it once did. This doesn't mean emotional availability is wrong. It means that emotional presence without emotional tension gradually loses its impact on the other person's nervous system. She doesn't process it as love anymore. She processes it as background noise. And this is the moment where the subconscious mind begins to crave distance, not because she doesn't care, but because distance at that point is the only thing that would make her feel something again. The request for space in many cases is the psyche's attempt to restore the emotional polarity that has been lost. She needs to miss you. She needs to feel the absence, because she has forgotten how to feel your presence. This is not a rare or unique experience. This is one of the most common emotional patterns in modern relationships, and it's becoming more common as our communication habits change. We now live in an era of hyperconnectivity, constant contact, morning texts and goodnight messages, scene receipts and real-time emotional tracking. On the surface, this looks like intimacy. But psychologically, this level of constant contact often eliminates the very emotional space that allows attraction and longing to breathe. When two people have no emotional distance, when there is no mystery, no absence, no space to miss each other, the relationship slowly loses its tension. And tension, despite its negative connotation, is essential to emotional aliveness. Think about it this way. Music doesn't move you because every note is comfortable. Music moves you because of the space between notes, the silence, the unresolved chord that finally resolves, the moment of anticipation that makes the arrival feel meaningful. Relationships operate the same way. The modern mistake is trying to fill every silence, to respond to every message immediately, to be constantly emotionally available as a way of proving love and commitment. But what this often communicates, not intentionally, but instinctively, is a kind of emotional desperation that the other person's nervous system registers as low value. Not because the person isn't worthy, but because the brain is wired to respond to scarcity and effort, and when both are eliminated, the emotional response diminishes. This is what she is unconsciously reacting to when she asks for space. She is trying to recover the feeling. Now here's the part that matters most. If you're watching this, if this is landing somewhere deep, there's a reason. Because most people who have been told, "I need space," did not see it coming. They thought everything was fine. They thought their consistency was a strength. They thought their availability was proof of love. And they were right in theory, but emotion doesn't always follow logic. And here is the quiet, uncomfortable truth about emotional distance. It usually begins not with a dramatic event, not with a fight, not with a betrayal, but with a slow erosion of emotional tension that neither person consciously recognizes until it's already happened. She didn't fall out of love in a moment. She slowly stopped feeling the emotional charge that love requires to stay alive. And now you're holding a conversation about space, wondering what went wrong, retracing every step when the real shift happened in the quiet days when nothing seemed wrong at all. That's the cruelest part of this pattern. It punishes presence. It punishes consistency. It punishes the people who try the hardest. Not because those qualities are wrong, but because they were expressed in a way that eliminated mystery, tension, and emotional reciprocity. The people who understand this dynamic, who learn to hold their emotional presence with confidence rather than anxiety, are the ones who maintain attraction over time, not because they play games, but because they understand that love, like all human experience, requires contrast to remain vivid. Before this video ends, sit with two questions. At what point does emotional distance actually begin? Is it the moment someone asks for space, or long before, in the quiet, ordinary moments that seemed completely safe? And perhaps more importantly, do people leave suddenly, or do they slowly disappear emotionally? One small withdrawal at a time, until the distance is already too wide to cross. There is no comfortable answer to either of those questions. but the discomfort is the point. Because the only way to understand attraction and the quiet, invisible ways it fades is to be willing to sit with what most people would rather not see. Here is the thing about space in a relationship. It is never really about physical distance. It is about emotional distance that already exists and the quiet, honest need to acknowledge it. When she says she needs space, she is not asking you to disappear. She is telling you that something between you has already faded and she doesn't know how to say that directly. So she reaches for the only word that comes close: space. The real question is never whether to give it or fight it. The real question is what you choose to understand about yourself and about the relationship in the silence that follows. Because that silence, that is where the truth has been living all along.